Hello and welcome to Awakenings. That was a bit of Golden Sun by Thunderbeat, amazing shaman and artist. Actually won the award in 2008 for New Native American Music. I'm your host, Michele Meiche, and you've tuned in or surfed into Awakenings, one of the places for the converging flow. Awakenings is an interactive live internet radio program that focuses on grounding the spiritual process of awakening. Here we explore the challenges in this process and offer suggestions, laughter, guidance. This is a place for insight, inspiration, upliftment, and to get a handle on how to map this terrain of individual and collective transition and change that comprises the awakenings that we're all a part of personally and collectively. It's about waking up to the truth of who you are, seeking and being open to what is seeking to emerge through you as you, and going out and sharing this in the world. And that's really what we do here. And we also have a lot of fun. Those of you that would like to listen by phone, you can call in 347-539-5122, and that's 347-539-5122. Want to let you know how the chat works, because I know we're going to have a lot of guests coming up here. Of course, there are people in the chat room, which, by the way, those of you that are just tuning in or finding out about Awakenings, it's a very supportive place, local and non-local. So we're using our local mind and our non-local mind here. The people in the chat room are very helpful. If you just put out a question, they're really great about welcoming everyone, new people that are signing up to Blog Talk as well as guests. If you have questions, if you do the question icon or just type in caps, then I can see it more quickly. You can also email, if that's up to you, and I'll put the email in the chat room because some people are reticent about calling in. Now, the chat has been renamed the Sacred Space of Empowerment, and there's a reason for that. So Tammy and Reiki Master renamed that. So it is clearly that, and it's holding the space for all of us to connect here and help at this really auspicious time, this time of awakening, but a collective of awakenings. I'm sure you've been seeing that it's a succession of awakenings and not just one. Love's Angels, the question icon, when you want to do a happy face to the left of the send, is a question icon. That helps me just catch it because I'm going to, working the switchboard, talking to you guys in the chat room and then our guest. It just helps me to see. I see so many people here that I know and love. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And I hope you have a lot of questions. I really sent this intent out. While you've been hearing me say I'm going to get some people on to share about, sacred geometry, fractals, the spiral, the scientific or mathematical equation of the truth of who we are. I think it's important. I like to do that. People that have taken any of my workshops or seminars, I try to do that because when I'm explaining things as a channel or psychic medium, and those of you in the room that do that kind of gift, have that, that's part of your work purpose, if you will, how you're showing up this way in the world, you know that a lot of times we have full memory or recognition of something or the how-to or what it's about, but not always how to explain it in kind of plain old English, if you will, or have that, and it's not our path to have that scientific approach. And so it's great to have people that have that reference. Yesterday we had Jill Peirce on talking about sound. And, vibration. This is what to me is so exciting about this time, is that we are going as a collective, and the 25 percentile, the imaging or the imaginists that Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about, where the imagers or the imaging cells know this, and our encoding is being decoded more quickly. What excites me about this information being more out there and being more tangible, and those just tuning in, Gregg will be in about 12:20, so I'm calling him at that point. So, no, it wasn't a false promo. He is really going to be here. Anyway, what's exciting about this is because if you, on many fronts, but one for me is working as a therapist and a hypnotherapist and a life coach, spiritual life coach. What I've been seeing is that when we begin to handle our problems, our issues, our situations, more and more from a space of energy and light, as opposed to belief. And that's all very important. I think it's still very important to clear beliefs and ideas and thought forms. As you change your beliefs, your feelings about yourself change. But really what we're talking about is getting more to a feeling level or feeling tone of things. And it's easier, if you think about it, it's easier to change around something if you just perceive it as a mathematical configuration or a shape or a form, or if you perceive it as a tone, chanting through something. So I'm really seeing a movement, and Jill Purse, who we had on yesterday, actually confirmed this, because she said she pioneered the sound healing of this type and form, I guess in the 70s, and she said she's seeing a real resurgence of this type of work and interest in this. So mind you, I think because we're mental, emotional, spiritual, we have a physical component, we have a material component, body, mind, spirit, soul, however you want to term it. Yes, it's important to work with our beliefs and thought forms and our behaviors, those people that are behaviorists. But I think for too long we've been really stuck there, trying to change behavior, trying to change beliefs. What I'm seeing is if we can go closer to causal point, if we can work with the thought forms and then work with the feeling that was generated to create whatever the belief that we have. Because usually our limiting beliefs, or when we hold too tight on a belief, we're not being adaptable or flexible, it's because two things. It got us something. It was pro-survival. It got us somewhere. And so the surface mind wraps itself around it and said, this is so, this is truth, as well as it becomes kind of second nature, and we think that it is us. And usually we create a belief or belief system around something to ensure life enhancement and less pain, whatever we turn that threshold. So a lot of times people don't want to give up beliefs so quickly, even if they're limiting, or the soul expression that's coming through and the spiritual energy that's coming through wants more expansion, more expression. This is when we bump up against resistance, as Bob Doyle talks about, from the secret, that resistance. That's where people get stuck. We keep, butting up against the new growth or the new decoding that's happening. However, what I'm finding is leaving all that and feeling where the resistance is coming in and moving through awareness to a time where there wasn't resistance begins to dismantle or dissolve the resistance. And in those types of processes, it's easier to think of what you don't like or what you don't want to change or what you feel is limiting you as perhaps more as a shape or an object, and move that around. Right? Ricky's saying yes. You can think about it right now. If you think of right now an issue that you're going through, get that thought in your mind, something that's going on. Now, when you visualize it in your mind, you see it with all the feelings and all the complexities. You see it with where it happened, why it happened, what could happen because of it. It's very full, and it gets very heavy, and it gets very dense. And then in traditional therapies, we would look at, well, why did you feel this way? Why, this happened to you and that happened to you. Again, I'm not saying this is not baby out with the bathwater. This has its place. I'm just saying I feel that we're moving into another playground, or, a lighter playground, as there's less and less magnetics. There's less and less sticky glue to our cells. We're able to move through these things. So if you just get that idea, but now if you see that issue, that problem or concern as a shape, if you see it as a form, you can begin to move it in your mind, and you can even begin to see that shape and form as a color. And you could make that color very bright and very strong, and that could make that issue or concern very strong. But you could also make that shape or that object or that form very light. You can lighten it and lighten it up and lighten it up so that you get a handle on it, you get a hold of it. Do you see when I'm doing that right now as I'm speaking to you in your mind, and I'm thinking of an actual issue that I had, by the way. So I'm moving that around now in my mind. Now it's this little ball of light, this little fuzzy light. And I can spring it out of my mind. You know, I can just make it disappear. This is the truth anyway, that we are these energy light beings, or energetic beings, if you will. The biblical passage, first there was the Word, and the Word was the Lord. Lord meaning law. So, you know, that's, as metaphysicians, we look at that. What does that mean? The Lord or law is the law of the universe. So that law was vibration. It was vibratory. And from the vibration or the sound, the bija, the individual or seed sounds, if you will, comes the seed forms. And those first forms are fractals or spirals. So that's why I'm really excited that Gregg is going to be on sharing about his book, Fractal Time. And why this fits in so much with the secret of the New Age is that when we begin to connect and play in this realm more, this is when we have that expanded consciousness, that expanded awareness. We live more predominantly in that realm instead of just sometimes, you know, with a certain set of people, or when you read a certain book, or you see a certain movie, or in meditation you have these experiences. My understanding is that this is going to be just, we're seeding it to be more and more mainstream, more and more collective. So, you know, my contention is, and definitely we're going to hear what Gregg has to say on this, is there's really nothing to fear this 2012, that nothing cataclysmic is happening. And, of course, everyone hears that it's the end of the world, and then next the caveat or the tagline, as we know it. It is, because we're stepping into a time that has not happened quite like this before. But we have the encoding. And because we have the encoding within this, we also have the answer. The question and the answer is within. The whole path and track is within. And there have been other times where similar experiences like this have happened. So this evolution is encoded within our very being and within all forms of life. Our awakening to this, are in the succession of the awakening that constitutes us using this part of our mind and part of our awareness. And I would say even less local. We're becoming less localized. I mean, look how we're all meeting here right now, which is amazing. You know, we're in all the, you know, hundreds to thousands now, people that are listening to not just awakenings. Miss Martha in the chat saying, I don't fear 2012, I just want something huge to happen. I know. Beam me up. Do something. I think the huge, Miss Martha in the chat, I'm speaking to you, I think it's happened. There's huge in little increments, and it seems like a lot has been with mental, emotional, spiritual awareness. And definitely the awareness will be moving into living more with these expanded awareness, or from a place of expanded consciousness. Like I was starting to say, that if you think of how we're all connecting here, we are these satellites. Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about the cells. We're the cells. We're comprised of cells that made the cells within the cells. And I think as we open up to that, there can be that living that, which I think is huge. I think it's a huge shift. If we talk about everybody playing this way, let's own up to, many of us are living this way already. So in a way, that old saying, preaching to the choir, so to speak. That's not so much what we're talking about. We're talking about, imagine a world, and we're imaging this now as imagers, where this is commonplace. And instead of resisting these changes, people are assisting in these changes. People are, from government to, universities to school systems to post office even. And Conscious is putting in the chat, his change is the only constant in this reality. Yeah. So we're in the evolutionary process, and as reflective consciousness, we're allowed to reflect on what's happening to us, as us, through us. We're reflecting on what we're actually doing to ourselves, but as a life form that is happening to us. So this reflecting gives us consciousness. If we choose to use it, if we choose to tap into that the awareness, we are the seed chain. That's why we're called star seeds, light seed, star seed, light beings. Many terms, but you always notice the seed is in there. The seeders, the seed this consciousness, or are seeded with this consciousness, and begin to live this and to assist and help others in seeding this. I just look at it as amazing. Some of you that regularly listen to Awakenings, when we had Neil Hagon, the visionary artist, who did amazing artwork on the energetic matrix. I love what he says is what's happening is that we just choose a different playground or fairground. Remember, he said many people are just leaving the fairground, leaving the old fairground. It's not about a struggle. It's about just leaving the old fairground, leaving the old game. Which is, if you look at it developmentally, we do that anyway. Maybe we every now and then will play in a sandbox like we did at 3, 4, and 5 years old. But pretty much most of us have different sandboxes now, right? We're playing at a different game. So to me, that's the similarity of what's happening. It's just as the ego personality develops, not the true ego personality, but the constructed, it likes to hold on to the old dynamics or the old paradigm. And then, of course, some people haven't been, their encoding is not happening as quickly. It's further off, so there's a little fear or uncertainty. And, of course, what do we do? Fear or uncertainty, or as Einstein says, a confused mind does nothing. Kind of just wants to hold on or hold the new order on. But I think with people, that like Gregg Braden that we're having on, that are getting this information out more on a collective or mainstream level, it's setting the tone and setting the steps. It's reinforcing what you know and setting the steps and setting the tone for those that are awakening, not as, it will in their own pace and time, but are just beginning to awaken, let's put it that way. So let's see, really looking forward to connecting with him. So those of you that are just tuning in, you are listening to Awakenings. Our guest is going to be Gregg Braden, the author of Fractal Time. And, of course, he also wrote Spontaneous Healing and Belief, The Divine Matrix, and The God Code. Today we'll be talking about Fractal Time, The Secret of 2012, and A New World Age. If you'd like to call in to listen or to ask questions or comment, you can call 347-539-5122, or you can listen by click to listen or in the chat. And if you'd like to ask questions in the chat room, you do need to sign up, and somebody can definitely help you. Reiki, I think, is that anybody that's in the chat can definitely help you. And so let's give a call here to Gregg Braden and dive in. He was on another interview, very busy. Glad he could squeeze us in, so hopefully he's there.
Hi, listen to Distance and Kennedy and Greg. Leave
Not
a message.
Yet. Okay, so I'm going to try another. I have another number for him. Da, da, da. I love technology. And any Twitters there. Thank you for joining in. It's great. I'm meeting some amazing people. And
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the number and try your call again.
Okay,
We're sorry.
so we'll try again on the other number that he gave me. That was a backup number, and I might have the area code wrong on that one. So I said between 12:20 and 12:30. And if he was on a show, anything like Awakenings, it may have gone over a little bit. That's what his PR person had told me, that he's on or told my assistant that he would be on another call before. I'm just so excited. So I'm going to put the number in the chat, and yeah, blessed technology, Tammy is saying. I know. Well, I look at it as innovation. You know, it's all from the mind of God, or the all that is. Those people that are touchy with about the G word. You know, these amazing technologies that we have come from this different space of consciousness. You know, somewhere, you know, almost seemingly out of the blue comes this, you know, amazing piece of technology. I mean, even you think of even for the time, the car, how that came about. And then the innovations that we keep making, the improving. Like Conscious was saying in the chat, how there's always, you know, we're always evolving, we're always changing. And because of that evolution or that change, we keep refining. You know, it's like we define something and then keep refining it. It gets better and better. And to me, that's what technology is doing. You know, I think it's about also finding a balance. I definitely agree with that. You know, it's part of that balance is how much do you do the technology? How much do you play it? You know, how much do you play? You know, the other day when I was on Twitter, we were talking with someone, and they were saying, you know, they just needed to get out, you know, stop tweeting, I guess, stop text messaging, and just do something else or get out in nature. And again, I want to say, I don't think it's not the technology's fault, so to speak. It's people. I mean, before we had, you know, cell phones or, you know, PDAs, people were using other ways to, you know, distractions, which I think they're healthy distractions. I think we need to disengage sometimes. But if you live in that place, Tammy in the chat is saying you realize how dependent you are on your computer. Yeah, it's true. It really, even I still back up certain things on hard copies. I still use some paper. You know, obviously I recycle, and if I'm just printing something up for me, personal use or with clients, I will use paper that's been used before. Obviously, if I'm doing a workshop or seminar, I can't do that, you know, and we still need paper, you know, we still need paper to use, unless everybody is going to have some form of electronic, you know, documenter. Does that make sense? Something to document. You know, I guess like, what is that, the ThinkPads or such, but it's not that mainstream yet. You know, the availability for that kind of thing is not always there. Soon will be, I'm sure. I'm sure that'll be the next focus. And it is already, but again, Destiny is talking about we are addicted to technology. Yeah. I don't know if I don't know. Do you think it's really, I think we're addicted to, I think addiction is part of, you know, part of the humanness in a sense. There's a part that likes to get in but is it? Sometimes I think we get immersed in stuff. Cosmic is talking about love paper. Yeah, I do love paper. I do too. And different types of paper, you know. If you get, you know, raw paper or more, you know, less processed paper, it's really quite beautiful. I just think it has to do with balance. I think that is the whole key. It's about balance. If you've been lost in technology, you know, I do recording and editing, so sometimes I can be lost, you know, many hours. And so I think then it's time to pull back, redirect, and do something else. But when you're absorbed in something, you know, writing a book, when I wrote my book, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours sometimes working on that. So we do tend to get absorbed in what we like. I think it's up to us as kind of captains of our own ship to monitor what's the right balance, or how do I get balanced? That's up to us. It's not the it's not the objects that are doing it to us. Now, Access is putting something in the, let's see, someone's putting something in the chat. I'm going to try Gregg in a couple more minutes, a few more minutes. What about the Access? Well, the axis is changing. The Earth's axis is changing. There are slight changes or variations, but you know, and that's a good question actually to ask Gregg. I do know there's another great book, Awakening Earth by Dwayne Elgin, who will also be on, who's really tracked also from a sociological point of view and geological point of view, that these changes do tend to happen over time, so it is cyclical. Yeah. Okay, so my Linda, my assistant who's in the chat, I love technology. Okay, while I was talking to you, I got emailed that the backup number that I have for Gregg is not the, I had the wrong zip code. Anyway, all perfect and complete. Yeah, so that, you know, balance is the key. Balance is the key. Does anybody think that it's not the key? I think too much we say, it's like anything else. Well, the alcohol, you know, alcohol is bad because alcohol does this to me or does that to me. I have never met a person that the alcohol jumped into the person's mouth and they had to drink it, or the BlackBerry or the iPhone or the computer. I've never, and if anybody, please email me if you have seen, now probably this will probably spark a YouTube video or something, but if you have seen technology or anything jump into someone's lap and make them type and make them do something technological. I think it's the person that does that. I think it's people that do that. And again, that's if are you balanced? Are you connected to your true self, your true nature? If you're connected to that aspect of you, then you do have, you know, you do have a balance. Oh, I love what you're writing in the chat, Dusty. There is science that proves there's a place in our brain that has a direct line to the higher spirit or higher consciousness. Absolutely, absolutely, there is, and many scientists and people in the medical profession are actually tracking that we are starting to access, if you want to call them, you know, brain waves, brain codes, hormonally as well as obviously physiologically, that is, and some that we haven't even used. Some aspects or parts that we haven't even used, and wondering what are they for. Well, I feel it's for this new consciousness that's expanding. Okay, let's try Gregg again.
This is Gregg.
Hey, Gregg, you're on the air with Awakenings.
I am happy to hear your voice. I just got off my last interview, and everybody's calling at the bottom of the hour trying to get a hold of me. I'm trying to keep the lines open for you.
Okay, I figured that. All good, all good. We really want to welcome you here. We have many listeners that are very excited that you're here to share your insight, your wisdom, and talk about your new book and everything of that nature.
Well, I'm very excited. So this is a 1-hour program, is that right?
Yeah, well, we're on actually at 12, but I think you had something before, so that's why we called you later.
Okay.
And we'll be, complete at 1:30. Go up there.
1:30
Pacific time, so it'll be an hour. Yeah.
2:30 my time. Okay, I'm going to follow your lead. Do we take any breaks?
No. It goes quick. It goes quickly. We're flying in divine time.
Cool. I'm going to follow your lead, and we'll just know where we go, and you let me know when you want to begin.
Sounds great. Yeah, we'll be in fractal time, right?
Okay. Yeah. Is this live or pre-record?
It's live.
It's live. Okay. Cool.
So we have people actually listening by phone, and we have people in the chat, and also listening by click to listen on the computer.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, and then it'll archive to some other places as well as iTunes. So.
Okay. Good. I'm happy to reach all those people. So you let me know
yeah.
where to begin and how you want to begin, and I am ready for you.
Well, let's. I've got so many questions. Some people have emailed questions previously, and some people already bought your book because they knew you were coming on, so they wanted to, kind of be up to speed a little bit. But let's just jumping in of what is fractal time. Can you talk a little bit about fractal time and the time codes?
Absolutely. Well, first, I can do that, but what I'd like to do, let's just jump back about a half a step, and we're going to talk about. I know that for a lot of people listening to this program, the year 2012
yes.
is something that is common for them to talk about as the global warming and the stock market, and for other people, might be tuning in, never heard anything about 2012, and that's where I was as an engineer working in the defense industry in the 1980s, the first time I ever heard the year 2012 come up. And my first question was, what's the big deal about 2012? Why not a nice even number like 2000 or 2020, or something like that? And what I very quickly began to understand was that to understand the significance of the year 2012, I would have to understand great cycles of time and our relationship here on planet Earth to where we are in the heavens, where our orbit leads us over these great cycles of time. And that led me to an understanding that I would have to understand our relationship to patterns and cycles, and this is where fractals come in. So all of these things are working together. Now, I'm sure some of our listeners have heard of the term fractal. It's a relatively new term in mathematics. It was only coined in the late 70s, early 80s by a gentleman named Benoit Mandelbrot, who created something called the Mandelbrot set, which is those are the patterns when you see a Discovery Channel or the Science Channel, they talk about fractals, and you see these brilliant patterns of color and energy. Those are generally part of this mathematic equation that helps us understand fractals. But what a fractal really is, it's very, very simple. A fractal is a pattern in nature that nature uses to fill the space of the universe. Is different as an atom seems from a blade of grass to a solar system to a galaxy. And they are different from one another, but nature uses just a very few simple patterns on different scales to create those things. And it's truly amazing. There are relatively few number of simple patterns that make the universe what it is today. So I think an example is probably the best way to describe what a fractal is, and then we'll apply that to cycles of time in 2012, and it'll all make sense if we do our work really well.
Right.
So I remember when I was studying science in school, and I know all of our listeners, if we were in school back in the 60s, 70s, right around in there, the first time I saw the picture of an atom in a science textbook with a nucleus and the little electrons orbiting around it, I thought, it looks a lot like a solar system, except it's tiny. And this is the whole idea of what a fractal is all about, because if we understand the principles that allow an atom to be what it is on that tiny level, it gives us insight into the same pattern of a solar system on a bigger level. Same pattern, just different scale. So we say that the atom is a fractal of the solar system. Or if we understand the solar system and the way it works, then we can take it to an even bigger level, to our Milky Way galaxy, which looks a lot like the pattern of an atom on a much bigger scale. And the same principles that allow the atom in the solar system to work help us to understand the galaxy. Same pattern, different scales. And if we understand the principle on one level, it will give us great insight into the way these patterns work on different levels. So we say the atom is a fractal of the solar system. The solar system is a fractal of the Milky Way galaxy. And if all of that makes sense, what I've done, the uniqueness of this book, I've applied that idea to time itself. And this is a very different way of looking at time. And what it says is that whatever is going to happen today or in the future has already happened in the past as a fractal of today or the future. The patterns that allow the events of our personal lives and our collective lives that we're seeing now and in the future, those patterns have already happened. We have already experienced those conditions at some point in the past as a fractal of what we can experience today. So the key is, if we know where to look in the past, it gives us a really good idea of what we can expect in the present and in the future. We say the past is a fractal of the present and the future. And in the book, I describe this in general, in really easy terms. It's not a scientific book. My mom read through it in 4 hours. So
yeah, it is. Great reading.
Yeah, Mom can do it. That tells me that we're in good shape here.
But that's what we need, Greg. We need it put.
Well,
you can't get to the collective or the masses with all the,
Yeah, there is some technical data in the appendices, and it refers to the website for some things. But if we understand all of those things, so in the book, I developed the idea of fractal time in general, and then the specific application of this book, the specific examples are all around 2012. What can we really expect? Realistically, there are a lot of very frightening prophecies, frightening predictions. The cable channels are doing documentaries that are just... I watched one the other night before I went to sleep in a hotel room, and it was so frightening. By the time I saw what 2012 held in store, I had to watch that 70s show for 10 minutes. Just to lighten it up a little bit before I could go to sleep, because they paint a pretty grim picture. And Hollywood has a full-length major motion picture coming out in the fall of 2009, complete with special effects, that is titled 2012. And the trailer is the first view that many people in a broad general population, the first insight they have into anything about the year 2012, and it's saying it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And so it's frightening a lot of people. So the whole idea with this book is my man brain wanted to know realistically what I could expect. And when people ask me, what can I say? Concrete information, facts about the year 2012. And to answer that question, I had to know where to look in the past to give us an idea of what we can expect, and so we can talk about that in the program today. So it's a long answer to a short question.
I like long answers.
Well, but we laid a foundation. Now we can spend the rest of our time tying into these principles
Absolutely.
for the rest of the program.
So what are the implications then with 2012? What are you coming away with by your research that 2012 is all about? What did you come away with?
Well, when we understand cycles of time, what we understand is that December 21st, the winter solstice of 2012, is not the end of the world, as many people are saying. And there are actually survivalist groups who are barricading themselves in bunkers right now, and they began doing it last fall, because their interpretation is that it is the end of the world, and they're going to ride it out, and when they emerge, there's going to be something very different happening here. They may be disappointed. I don't know. I'm going to tell you, first, before I answer that question, I'm going to tell you how I know definitively it's not the end of the world, because when I was in my hotel room the other night watching late-night television, there was a commercial for a local furniture company. It came on, and they said they're selling all of their furniture for nothing down and no payments and no interest until the year 2014. That tells me that they know it's not the end of the world, because 2014 is when we have to start paying interest on our furniture. So that's how I know.
I agree, Greg. It's going to be like the Y2K, that everybody's waiting for something to happen.
Well, and in all honesty, I'm not saying it's a bed of roses. What we do know is that Earth, in this orbit around a great energy source at the center of our Milky Way galaxy, modern science has now confirmed these two things only in recent years. Number one is that there is a powerful source of energy that influences life on Earth at the center of the Milky Way. That's now a scientific fact. And some people know this as the Great Central Sun, so maybe they can tie this into their teachings. And number two, that is now a scientific fact, is that Earth goes through periods of time where it is influenced, sometimes to a greater degree, sometimes to a lesser degree, by its location in the orbit around that source of energy. When we're closer to it, and when Earth is tilted toward that energy source, we get more influence. When it's further away in the orbit and tilted away, we have less influence. Science has now confirmed that. And the third thing that brings all this together is that our own science now tells us that these things change on a cyclic basis over long periods of time, and that the cycles can be measured, calculated, and predicted. And apparently, ancient civilizations knew this. The Mayans actually put numbers and dates, and that's why we talk about the Mayan calendar a lot. But intuitively, if we never knew about the Mayan calendar, it still makes sense. If we're closer to this source of energy, obviously we're going to have more influence. If we're further away, we're going to have less. And we happen to be living a rare moment in the history of our planet when we are tilted in a way that aligns us. It gives us straight shot, unobstructed access to this powerful field of energy. It's a magnetic field that emanates from the center of our Milky Way galaxy. It's only happened, we are only the fifth generation since human history began that will ever experience it, has experienced this. And the last human that experienced what we're experiencing now was here about 1,700 years before the biblical exodus from Egypt by the Hebrews. So we haven't seen this. We're kind of in uncharted territory in terms of modern understandings. So my purpose in writing this book was to help us to understand the rhythms of these cycles and to take those rhythms, look back in time to give us dates in terms of when the conditions were happening in the past that we're either experiencing now or about to experience, and then go into the record of the Earth, go into the ice cores in Antarctica, where there is a layer of ice that correlates to every year on planet Earth for the last 500,000 years, and in that layer of ice, it tells us what the temperatures on the planet were. It tells us how strong the magnetic fields were. It tells us whether the oceans were rising or falling, and whether the ice caps were freezing or melting. And it tells us how much energy from the sun, was it stronger or weaker during that period of time. And the interesting thing is, and again, this is a long answer to your short question, when we do this, when we do these very simple calculations based on the rhythms of nature and cycles, what we find is that the dramatic changes that we've seen on the planet in the last 130 years are exactly the changes that always happen when we go through this cycle. And as dramatic as they seem to us compared to where, our ancestors knew the Earth to be 150 years ago, the changes actually bring us precisely into the alignment of the readings that we find in these ancient records, in the ice cores, for example. So the temperature rise of 1 to 2 degrees centigrade, that's what always happens when we go through the cycle. And that rise in the temperature is always enough to melt some of the ice on the poles like we're seeing now. And that ice turns into water. It's got to go somewhere. The sea levels always rise to some degree. The magnetic fields always fall within a range, and we're right in that range right now. So the physical changes on the Earth are precisely in alignment with what we would expect to see at this time in history. It's just that no one living today remembers the last time that we went through the cycle. But for me, I'm less concerned about the physical changes on the Earth, more concerned about how we treat one another as people and civilizations as we deal with the changes on the Earth. And this is one of the reasons I wrote this book and why I feel so passionately about sharing this, because we can learn from civilizations in the past, and we can see the mistakes that they made when they reached the time in their cycle that we are in ours. And we can see how the mistakes led to the collapse of some of the greatest civilizations on the face of the Earth. And we can see the parallels between what they did and what we're doing now. But we still have the time to choose differently.
So it's more of an interpersonal is what I'm hearing you say.
Well,
the nature will take care of itself. It's done
the interpersonal, between governments, between nations.
Yeah.
What happened in the past is the world changed, and Egypt's 20th dynasty is a perfect example. And the year 1155 BC is actually a seed date in the cycles that set into motion the conditions that we're now experiencing and that will culminate around the year 2012 in that zone of time. In the year 1155 BC, Egypt found itself faced with conditions very similar to what's happening now. The weather changed, climate changed, their ability to grow food changed, just as is happening with us.
I guess that's where some of the fear comes in to some people, is because they do know that, and they do know what happened to those civilizations. Now, Greg, we have a couple questions in the chat. I'm trying to scroll back.
Let me finish. I want to finish that thought, and then I'm happy to take the question, because what happened was not understanding the cycle. Egypt's 20th dynasty, they didn't know that it was this is definitely an intense cycle, but it's a brief cycle. They began to engage in multiple wars. They fought their neighbors over the last vestiges of the resources. They couldn't sustain that number of wars at the same time. The economy was stretched. The economy went broke. People stopped working. They went on strike, and they lost their jobs. They lost their homes, not unlike many of the things that are happening now. So my question is, are we making the same mistakes, and can we learn from our past? And I just wanted to follow up on that before we go to the questions.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying. It sounds like it's going back to just regular old people stuff. Focusing on the relationship, what are the heart center? What are we really doing?
Sure.
I keep saying in these changes, let's not lose our humanity. Let's not lose, and maybe it is if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying if more people know what's going on and have the heads up, then there can be, obviously a sense of, understanding and relief, but perhaps we won't have this extreme behavior.
I don't think we have to lose all that we cherish as a civilization and everything we've worked so hard to accomplish if we recognize that the change brings an opportunity to find out what works and what doesn't, and the things that are no longer sustainable, stop doing them. And the things that are, do more of those things. And I think that's how we move forward at this pivotal window that 2012 is offering.
Now, also, one of the questions, if you're saying that this has happened already or happened in the past, how does the idea of evolution come in on that? If we're evolving or or we have more expanded awareness or more expanded consciousness, but yet this has already happened, is it another dimension that this has already happened on?
No, it's happened in the very, very physical third dimension. All we've got to do is look into the history of our planet and into the archaeological record. And what we see is, and some of the archaeological finds are new, and they're rewriting history. The history that you and I learned when we were in school between the 1950s and 60s and the end of the 1990s, that history is being rewritten right now. It takes 8 to 10 years for the new discoveries to trickle down into the textbooks. But archaeologists are finding evidence of advanced civilizations before we should have had advanced civilizations that had hot and cold running water. They had closed sewage systems. They had advanced art, music. They had glass in their windows. They had a written record that we today have never been able to translate. And this is one of the civilizations that collapsed when at the point in their cycle where we find ourselves now. And the evidence strongly suggests the same thing we talked about in Egypt as well, that it was the fighting between nations over resources that led to their collapse. And if we can learn to cooperate, here's the thing for me. If we can learn to cooperate as a family, a global family, because we need to survive this brief, intense period of change now, my sense is that we will find that we like working together and we'll keep doing it even when we're not going through a 2012 change. And I think that may be a great opportunity right now for us to learn to work together as people and as nations and move into a new sustainable way of living on this planet.
And Greg, you sharing this, it gives us, everyone, something very tangible. This is something that we all can do, starting with ourselves, right?
Well, absolutely. And so, but the question is about evolution, and without having being able to interface with the person asking it, when we talk, there's different kinds of evolution. If you're talking about conscious evolution, there definitely is an opportunity here. I don't think this is so much about the evolution, Darwinian kinds of evolution. But even though we have evidence of highly advanced technology and civilizations in the past, multiple cycles in the past, some that's going back 12,000 years before history even begins. Even though we have that evidence, it appears that there is this thing about humans in that we tend to fight one another when we're faced with something we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And this may be an opportunity for us to consciously evolve and spiritually evolve beyond that. Not that our bodies are necessarily going to change into some other life form, although some people are speculating that a new human is emerging,
mm-hmm.
but that we can consciously choose to cooperate and recognize that we're better people for that we live better lives, and that we have a better world when we do that. And that would be a huge evolutionary leap in human consciousness to choose to outgrow the habit of war to solve our problems, and to choose to consciously walk away from the most powerful weapons ever developed to destroy everything we cherish. Those are conscious choices, and if we look at one another and say we're facing a problem together as a family on this planet, the money we're putting into the weapons could go a long way to help us just heal and have food and water and medicine to get through the changes on the planet. Let's make a choice and do that. That would be a huge step in conscious evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, it would be.
That's the kind of evolution that the caller is asking about.
Mm-hmm. Now, these are in the chat, and we have some people online, but one person, Dusty, is saying, what if 2012 is something so major that would cause the Earth to get knocked off the axis to change the way and what signals go through the air to make modern technology vanish?
Well, I think it's a good question. First of all, what I'm finding, and our Fractal Time talks about this, is I think by the time 2012 gets here, it's all over. And what the cycles are showing is the big years are 2010. 2010 is a huge year according to the cycles. 2010 is the year when many of the cycles converge. The cycle for 1929 seed date for economic collapse repeats in 2010. The 1914 seed date for global war repeats in 2010. And what the book also says very clearly is that every time a cycle repeats, at the end of one cycle, and before the next one begins, there's this little moment called a choice point. This is what the physicists call a choice point. And a choice point is a place in the cycle where our choices are much more potent than at any other time in the cycle. So we can also just easily say 2012 is a huge opportunity to redefine all of the patterns of the past that no longer serve us. And rather than seeing another economic collapse, we could plant the seeds for the greatest economic abundance of the entire cycle. We could walk away from the habit of war. We could do that. And 2010 is the big year for all of those things. I think 2012 is the year of emergence from all of the choices that we've made. And this is what the Mayan calendar says. The Mayan interpretation of their calendar, the oral tradition, says that we're actually in a gestation period akin to an embryo in a human womb. And there's actually some math that supports this on different cycles. But that 2012 is the end of the gestation and the birth into a new way of being based on everything that we've learned and what's happened during that time. And I think 2010 is going to be a big year for us to apply what we've learned. Now, in a technological society, a breakdown of communication is always going to cause a lot of problems. And what I'll say is there is nothing scientifically right now that suggests or supports any cataclysmic condition within the next 3 years or right after that that is any greater than the catastrophic conditions that we're already living. We're already living major magnitude earthquakes unlike anything we've ever seen. We're already seeing tsunamis wipe entire cities from the face of the earth, and sea levels rising and superstorms wiping cities from the face of the earth. We're already seeing multiple fires raging out of control on multiple continents at the same time. We're already seeing millions of people dying from disease that has no cure. We are blessed in North America to see less of those things, although we have. And we all know that if it happens anywhere, it can happen everywhere. So, and we also know that these things, which are the most frightening of the predictions and prophecies, those aren't the only things happening. There's a lot of good, beautiful things happening right now as well.
Yeah.
So it's not that on 2012 all these things happen on that date. 2012 represents a zone of time. We're talking about an alignment between stars and galaxies and planets and solar systems, huge systems that don't turn on a dime. They move into these alignments, zones of alignments that last for periods of time. We moved into the 2012 zone in 1980. I'll talk about this in the book, and this is the calculations show this. We move out of that zone around the year 2016. Now, the caveat, there always is the possibility that something completely out of left field could happen.
Yeah, you got to throw that in.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could have an asteroid show up from nowhere.
That's right.
And strike the Earth, and it would ring it like a bell and upset all the systems. I mean, could that happen? Yes. Is it likely? Do we see any evidence of it coming right now? Not in 2012. The magnetic fields of the Earth, they flip-flop every once in a while, and they reverse. North becomes south, south becomes north. And that would wreak havoc on GPS, on computers, communications. Has it happened before on the Earth? It's happened 14 times in the last 4.5 million years. Is there any evidence that it's going to happen in the next 3 years or immediately after? The answer is no. And we've gone into the ice cores in Antarctica, and I'll just let our listeners know, of all the things that we're worrying about, a polar reversal is probably one that we don't need to put any energy into. And here's the reason why. The magnetic fields of the Earth, they do fall and flip-flop every once in a while. Before they flip-flop, they have to fall to a minimal, it's called a threshold, a minimal threshold, before they lose the energy to go through reversal. And even though the magnetic fields of the Earth are dropping, and they're lower now than they've been in 2,000 years, they're so high, they're still so far above that threshold that the fields have never flip-flopped until they reach that threshold, and there's nothing to suggest that they're going to go there between 2009 and 2012. Unless some bizarre thing like a galactic superwave comes from out of nowhere, or an asteroid hits the planet, or another planet collides with the planet, or, I mean, something completely out of left field. But there's nothing in the historic record. There's nothing scientifically that I'm seeing on the radar right now that suggests that gives us a reasonable expectation that the magnetic fields are going to do a flip-flop in the next 3 years.
But Earth is becoming less magnetic.
The magnetic fields of the Earth are what connect all life and regulates all life on this planet. The magnetic field of the Earth is like a blanket that buffers us from the radiant energy of the sun and plasma and ionized particles in space, called the solar wind. It's our protection from that solar wind. And what happens is we get to this point in the cycle, there's a mechanism that's still not clearly understood, that the fields do weaken. And they have in the past, and they're doing it right now. They weaken to a point just enough where we get more energy from the sun. It heats up the atmosphere. It heats up the Earth. It melts the poles. It raises the sea levels. It changes the weather. That happens on a cyclic basis. So the fields are weaker. But the last time we went through a magnetic reversal, I was a geologist before I became a defense engineer. And this gives me the opportunity to go back into some of my geologic training. Last time Earth went through a verifiable magnetic reversal was 780,000 years ago. And we've come close a couple of times. We're nowhere near, and it didn't happen, and we're nowhere near that close right now, barring some bizarre, unforeseen circumstance. There's nothing to suggest that those fields are going to collapse, drop to zero, collapse, and reverse in the next 3 years. Actually, the next time we see anything even close to what could possibly affect those fields, it's in the year 2013, 2014. There is a small asteroid that will have what's called a near miss. It's not going to hit us, but it's going to come close enough that moving through the energy field of that asteroid could upset communications and could cause some pretty weird weather things. But it's not on a collision course with us. It's just that going through the field of the debris that asteroid actually creates may cause some things. But we don't see that before 2012.
Well, you know what's interesting, and I know you've touched on this before. You've in other interviews, that what you're saying, it connects in with what a lot of metaphysicians are saying, as well as astrologists or indigenous cultures that have been mapping this from a metaphysical, spiritual, if you will, point of view. Because in those realms also it's being seen that by 2012 is an emergence, perhaps a new order in a sense, by what our decisions have been, as well as from 2009 on, that there's a real focus on right relationship and right livelihood. And Gregg, when you're talking about this relationship, that it's more about the fighting. How do we handle these changes? To me, it really reaffirms and confirms that it is about this relationship, our relationship to ourselves and to others, and how do we manage in these challenging times and this challenging transition. Do you have any thought on that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
And I'll try to make it a briefer thought so we can get more of our calls.
Okay.
It's no. I think it can be no accident that right now, when we are faced with what the experts are telling us are the greatest challenges of 5,000 years of recorded human history, the greatest number of challenges, the greatest magnitude of challenges that literally have the ability to forever change civilization and the planet as we know. We're faced with all of those right now. At the same time, the same science that's telling us about the challenges has made 2 new discoveries that change everything about the way we see our relationship to the world. And I think it's no accident that these 2 things are happening at the same time. So on this program, we've talked a little bit about the magnetic fields of the Earth. That's where the action is. The magnetic fields of the Earth connect all life on Earth, all things, from an atom or a cell or a molecule or a blade of grass or a hamster or a goldfish or cats and dogs and you and me in solar system. If the magnetic fields are connecting all of these things, the magnetic fields are what are being influenced by the changes. The magnetic fields are becoming stronger or weaker and influencing everything from climate and weather and to our immune response, to our sleep patterns. All of these are linked through the magnetic field of the Earth. A longer program, we could talk about all of those.
So, have you back, Gregg? You open the door. Okay.
All right. So, we don't have to have a book to be on your program. I'm happy to come back.
Okay, cool.
So the reason I'm saying that, so now I think there can be no doubt in our minds that the magnetic fields are important, that they regulate much of what we've come to know as the familiar world outside of our windows. So having said that, I think it's no accident that the new discoveries now have shown that the human heart creates its own magnetic field that can be tuned in such a way that it becomes part of the greater field of the planet under very precise conditions. And those conditions are the experiences that our most ancient and cherished spiritual teachers have always talked to us about. When we create heart-based emotion, this isn't in the mind, this isn't in the brain, this isn't something we think about. It is a heart-based experience of things that we describe as care, genuine states of care, appreciation, gratitude. Those kinds of emotions, when they're created in a very specific way inside the human body, set up a field that is called coherence. They set up what is called a coherent relationship in the human body between our heart and our brain. And it's that coherence inside of our bodies that's not limited to our bodies. It becomes part of the greater field. And this is so real. This isn't like New Age rhetoric or metaphor. This is so real that our own satellites, 22,000 miles above the surface of the Earth, that measure the magnetic fields of the Earth every 30 minutes, actually picked up and registered big changes in the magnetic fields of the Earth on September 11th, 2001, because people's feelings on that date were focused. So many people were having so many heart-based emotions on that day. It literally sent a ripple through the magnetic fields of the Earth. And this alerted scientists. They said, wow. I mean, they never realized we were so connected to the very fields of the Earth that sustain life and are undergoing the 2012 changes. And this has led to a number of research projects. And one of those, for transparency, I'll say I'm on an advisory board as well as a steering committee that is now called the Global Coherence Initiative, GCI. Mm-hmm. It's the first of its kind, science-based initiative, twofold. First level is to measure these fields of the Earth and put them onto a website so everybody can see them, and that's being done right now.
Wow. And
the second level is teaching people to create this coherence in their personal lives because it's good for us. It's what triggers the anti-aging hormones in our bodies. Right. It strengthens our immune system. It helps create strong families and communities. But beyond that, it also links us into the very fields of the Earth that are undergoing the chaos of the alignment for 2012. And as we link to that field, we literally have the opportunity to influence that field, to smooth the rough edges or to mitigate the chaos of a changing world. And this is the first of its kind science-based initiative where people don't have to learn a meditation, don't have to learn a prayer, they don't have to do anything any differently. It's just whatever they're already doing. It teaches us how to move out of the brain and into the heart in a very precise way to do it. So I just want to mention, for people that are interested, if you'd like to know more about this, you go to my homepage website, greggbraden.com, GreggBraden.com. In the middle of the page, there's a button that says, click here to learn about the Global Coherence Initiative. And it will take you to a little slideshow, and you can participate every way from being just a casual observer to checking it out every once in a while, to actually becoming part of the family that is now, I believe, close to 10,000 strong throughout the world, learning and following and tracking and part of the online teachings, all at no cost, that are helping people to find this place of coherence. Or you can even go through a training program and teach other people how to create coherence. And all that is available now in the last years of this cycle as we're going through the great changes where this field is being influenced by the shift.
I love it.
So that's a long answer to that short question, but heart-based living is the bottom line.
Yeah, well, it's all the COs, cooperation, collaboration, it's that connecting. Okay, if we can, we've got a couple of people that are on the line that have texted me and that are also, okay. Hello, Conscious, you're on the air with Gregg Braden.
Hello. How you doing, Awakening? Hello, how you doing?
Great, how are you?
Excellent.
I can hear you a bit, and then also you texted the question, so I can relay it to Gregg.
I'm getting a lot of bounce back, so if you can just relay that question, it will help.
Okay. Do you have a question, Conscious?
Yes, a real brief question. I was wondering, when he was speaking in connection with cohesiveness, if in all actuality, Gregg, have you ever gave any consideration to basically what holds reality together for an atom, the electrons and the electromagnetic qualities, as far as like our aura and the electromagnetic field around the Earth? Have you ever gave like any consideration to that maybe we could implement a higher form of conscious thought to manifest reality the way that we intend for it to be? Is my question clear?
Not really to me. Now, what about the atom? You had something about the ascension process for the Mayan predictions.
Well, I could hear bits and pieces of that question, and I think the answer to the question is the subject of an entire book that I released in the year 2007. It's called The Divine Matrix.
Yeah.
Divine Matrix, and the bottom line to that book is that our own science now has confirmed that what we call reality is all based and linked in an underlying field of energy that we can now measure, and that human consciousness is part of that field. And as we move into this heart-based way of being, that through our hearts we literally, not just figuratively, we literally can rearrange the stuff that our physical reality is made of. We can rearrange the stuff that holds an atom together. We can rearrange the stuff that holds the cells of our bodies together. And now that we're learning that language, we can facilitate it in very positive, life-affirming ways in our bodies. This is where the miraculous healings are created, by consciously speaking the language that this field recognizes. So that's for individuals. And then on a larger level, the same principle is being used to create peace between nations. It's very well documented in scientific journals, the Journal of Conflict Resolution, 1988. I reference it in the book, The Divine Matrix. Actually did a large-scale experiment during the first Lebanese War where they used these principles, and as long as they did what they were doing, there were no terrorist attacks dropped to zero. Crimes against people declined. Emergency hospital room visits declined. Traffic accidents declined beyond chance. They said statistically there was definitely an effect, and this is what told scientists that we are part of this field, and this is what ties us into the ancient and the spiritual traditions, because science says, okay, we're part of the field, what do we do with it? And the ancient traditions say, hey, not only are you part of the field, but here's how you use that connection in your life. Unfortunately, we took that information a couple of thousand years ago and made it into religions with rules and laws and frightened a lot of people, but the principles are very, very clearly stated in that book.
Okay, putting the Divine Matrix in the chat, and Conscious went back in the chat saying that you answered. I think he might be still on the line, but calling via Skype. And Skype, we have improvement. We need to evolve.
Well, just so you know, I can hear you fine, and when the call comes through, what I'm getting is an echo and a lot of bounce that breaks up the next word that comes through. So if you can help me out with that, I appreciate it.
Okay, cool.
You could just repeat what you hear, and then we'll do it that way.
Okay, that's great. But he said that you answered. And we have another call, 509. Okay. All right, there we go. 509-895, you're on the air with Awakenings and Gregg Braden.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Gregg, it's just a great honor to hear you and, of course, to be able to speak with you today. You answered the first part of what I called in of just now, with realizing that humans are connected to the field and humans do influence the field, the electromagnetic field. Since we know that scientifically, what if the event that comes out of left field that we're not considering, what if you get 6 billion people consciously aware and emanating and resonating the field and the vibration that causes these shifts in electromagnetism to occur in the twinkling of an eye, in an instant? What if that is the critical mass? What if that is the event? It's not coming from outside. What if it's coming from within?
It's a great question, and it actually is the subject of many of the mystical texts, because as many prophecies and predictions as there are, and as frightening as many of them are, whether we're talking about Nostradamus, Ayer-Casey, the Hopi prophecies, the Navajo prophecies, the Andean prophecies, Tibetan prophecies, when people write about them, they often focus on the frightening negatives, and they are there. However, if you look at the prophecies in their entirety, they also say that just the opposite of all of those things are possible, that we have the opportunity to enter this era of unprecedented peace, cooperation, sustainable living, extended lifespans, all of those things. But what's so interesting to me is every single one of those prophecies, as much as they're cited, the piece that is overlooked, in my opinion, is that not one of them, not one single, even the biblical prophecies, when you read the translations before the edits and read them in their entirety, excuse me, they all say that they cannot give us the outcome for the end of this cycle, and they can't tell us how our 2012 cycle ends, because we're writing the ending while we're living the conditions.
Exactly.
And the opportunity. The opportunity is, it sounds almost like a science fiction novel. It sounds like the story of a planet and the people of that planet on a journey that began so long ago that no one remembers how it began or even really why we're here. And at the end of the journey, the people of the planet learn the only way to survive their journey is by everyone coming and working together in a way that's very different than what they've ever done before. And so the beauty, and the thing I'd like to add to that is, to everything you said that I agree with, is that what the studies are showing is that the heart-based language that speaks to the magnetic fields of the earth is such a potent language that a relatively few number of people can learn that language clearly, and the whole benefits from it. So not all 6 billion people have to do it. And we can't, because not all 6 billion people have the luxury to be on the phone and the radio and the computer like we are today. Some of them are just trying to get through the end of the day to live.
Yeah. But I tell you, Greg, it seems like people are starting to realize inside that they are all words of a living book, and that what they think happens, and that even the person working on the dock, even internally, they're starting to see it and feel it inside themselves, so they don't even have to be listening to guys like us on the radio. But it's just such a great honor to hear you and speak with you today. I'll go back to the chat and listening, and thanks for answering my question.
Well, your communication came through on my phone really well, and I want to say it's an honor for me to be here, and I want to thank you for all of your work and the clarity of your question. You obviously, that question reflects some really deep understanding and insights, and I appreciate the work that's led you to that place.
It comes from reading books like The Divine Matrix. Doing our homework, as we say.
Yeah,
well, that means we did our work well together then.
Yes, and if I may, he hosts a wonderful show here, also called Aware Talk Radio. So he's walking his talk.
Cool. Okay.
Great to connect, Chad. Yeah, I love what you're saying about that heart-based. It reminds me too, Greg, that I think people need to remember that it's all consciousness, so it's really the inner state. Like what you're saying, that people that in a sense don't have the time or the luxury to be doing what we're doing or connecting are still feeling this, still receiving that heart energy, that heart vibration, if you will.
It's not even about receiving so much. It's because we're in the field.
We are the field.
This gives a whole new meaning to the concept of Gaia that was coined about 30 years ago, and us being a part of a greater living system. The fact that we are all linked to that system so intimately through our hearts. Maybe we're aware of it, maybe we're not, but we all have that link, and that consciously applying that link by becoming better people actually has the power to smooth out some of the rough edges of the chaos that is coming from where we are in this change. And the changes are driving us to that place within ourselves. And I think this may be what many of the indigenous traditions, the Hopi have a beautiful map on what is called Prophecy Rock in northern Arizona that shows two paths that humans walk throughout this entire cycle that they may walk. And one path is a long, sustainable path. The other one is a shorter, rocky path that ends up and goes nowhere. And then there's a third path that connects the two. It's the choice point. And the Hopi say that we can walk either path, but at some point we all must choose to carry on with one of the two. And the path that allows us long, sustainable ways of living is the path of our recognizing our connection to one another and our connection to the earth and honoring that in a sustainable way, rather than choosing the path of what they call greed, comfort, and profit. And profit, not that it's wrong to make money, but this is profit at the expense of other people, that kind of profit. Mm-hmm. So they say that's not sustainable. So they're, in their own way, all these different traditions are saying we've got to get really clear about our relationship with ourselves and how we are with others to sustain what we cherish on this planet and move forward as a family.
That seems to be key. Now we have another caller. Let's see if... Hello, 305-300. You're on Awakenings.
I'm sorry. I didn't know I had pressed in. But all the same, I'm very happy to say hello to Gregg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
I didn't know I had pressed in talk to host, but I've been listening to Gregg, and I saw all the ones on Google Video, and I thought it was amazing, and I wish I could be in New Mexico next month when he's there, and all the blessings in the world to both of you.
Well, I can hear parts of your conversation or parts of your comment, and I want to say it's good for me to hear those things today. It's been a rough couple of months, so I appreciate your kind words and your words of encouragement. And in New Mexico next month is the International Conference on Science and Consciousness for people that may be wondering what that was a reference to. And I'm doing a keynote for that conference. Amazing people come together I think it's the 16th year for that conference, and it truly is a forum for new thought, new ideas, based in some really grounded science and fact. Mm. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Blessings.
And Gregg, where is that conference so we can let people know about it?
It's for all intents and purposes, it's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's actually just north of Santa Fe, but they call it Santa Fe, New Mexico. If people go to my website under schedules, okay, there's all of the events where I'm speaking are there, and each event has its own link, and it will take people directly to the venue and the producers if they're interested in that. They can see who else is going to be speaking there. I know I'm in very, very good company every year when I speak at that conference.
Just put it in the chat also so people have that. And those that will be listening to the archive later or via iTunes, you can go to greggbraden.com and, as he said, check the schedules, and that will lead you to where he's going to be speaking. And
thank you for that. Thank
you. That helps. Oh, this has been so helpful, for all of us. I think, one of the things I've been following your work since Awakening to Zero Point, and when you had all the DVDs coming out. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, so you're the one that was following me all those years.
That's right. So many.
Well, thank you. Thank you for supporting. That book, Awakening to Zero Point, was written as a workbook for scientists and engineers in 1988 for a group of people that felt excluded from the kinds of conversations we're having today because they didn't relate to the language. Mm. So what I did my very best to take these ideas, bridge them into the terms that those scientists and engineers, men and women with really good hearts, brilliant minds, just had never been exposed to this kind of this perspective. And people started Xeroxing that. It showed up all over the world, so we went ahead and released a couple of books that are now out of print. So I appreciate your support in those years. Thank you very, very much.
Which have to come back. It's great. Well, everything you've been writing and speaking about, I feel, is just building and helping to map this time of transition and change. And one of the reasons, obviously since being aware of you since that time frame, but also that what you're speaking about is not the fear and the doom and gloom. You also aren't doing the Pollyanna that there's nothing to worry about, everything's hunky-dory, but really giving people something that they can do individually, because that's what I think is so needed right now. And what you're saying coming from the heart and that resonance is something that each and every one of us can do continually.
Well, I think we're learning to take care of ourselves, and in caring for ourselves, we're able to care for one another in the same way. And I just, before I came onto this call, I discovered a very exciting piece of information. Can I share something exciting on the air?
Yes.
I just spoke with our publisher. The Fractal Time was released 1 week ago, and this weekend it looks like it will be a New York Times bestseller. And the reason I'm excited about that, well, a couple of reasons. First, I'm just honored that it happens, but my challenge as an author is to find the language that bridges the best science of our time today with some of our most cherished understandings and traditions that we've all harbored in our lives for so long. And on this radio program, for all intents and purposes, we're probably speaking to the choir. These are people that are involved in these conversations all the time, and I'm very honored to be speaking with this choir. But for the book to have that much visibility tells me that we are finding a language that helps us to reach beyond the choir into the hearts and minds of people who typically might not be looking into this kind of material, but we're doing it in a way that is meaningful to them so that they are following up and sharing this with their friends. And to me, that's the great honor, and it's very exciting because that's where change begins, is by sharing the change in a way that makes sense, not telling people what to do, but helping people understand what's happening. And once we understand it, then it usually makes sense what to do. What to do is, it's obvious, but it's only when we don't understand what's happening that we're saying, okay, I don't get it. Tell me what do I need to do here? And when we understand the connections between us and the planet and the cycles and how things in the past happen again and again and again and patterns and choice points, all of a sudden it becomes very clear what our opportunity is. And that's why I'm excited that the book has that much visibility.
It's great. And what you're speaking of, too, gives people the empowerment. It's not always something happening to them or to us, but there's that self-empowerment of now I can, as you talk, that choice point. Now I can make a conscious choice because I have this information. This is what's going down. This is what's happening. And I do think once people have more information, they do, for the most part, act consciously and in care with the other people. Just like you said after 9/11, we definitely knew what happened, and we knew so something changed, and people came together with it. I think it's the unknown. It's the gap that breeds the fear. So this is giving those steps of what people can do.
I think so. And again, a lot of people, the first insight they have into the year 2012 is going to be a really scary movie in a theater on a huge screen with surround sound, and those images are powerful. I mean, I got to tell you, I was writing this book for Fractal Time. The first time I saw the... Are you there?
Oh, we're at the 90-second mark.
Okay, first time I saw the trailer for this very frightening movie, and even knowing what I know, it had a very powerful impact on me. So I want to say thank you for being such a gracious host, and God bless you, all of our listeners, and thank you for the opportunity to be on your show today in our last 90 seconds here.
Yes, thank you, Gregg. And those that we one more listener calling in, we'll have to have Gregg back. This will just be an opening. Okay. Anyway, we've been speaking with Gregg Braden. His new book out is The Secret of 2012 and a New Age, Fractal Time. You can go to his website also for more information of where he's speaking at greggbraden.com. And once again, I want to thank all of you calling in to listen, all of you in the chat, that sacred space of empowerment, for being here and making Awakenings what it is today. Thank you so much, Gregg, for being on Awakenings.
Thanks again. Take good care.
All right, you too. Blessings. You've been listening to Awakening. Our guest is Gregg Braden, the author of the new book, Fractal Time. Awakening there every Wednesday, Friday, and for more information, self-enlightened. Until next time, shine your light in.